It's like the stock market. The stocks go up, they go down. You don't sell them when they're low, you sell them when they're high. And so you just have to ride that wave. And that's what I did with my personal portfolio. And now I've got, a few paid off houses that at one time were eating my lunch for me, but now they're paid off because I had somebody putting that money in a piggy bank for me. And I had, the things that were less seen, the less sexy things, I was able to get past all that and, now have a few properties that's now making me a good amount of money every single month. And that's where a lot of these accidental investors, some of them are just starting out where I was, and I see that, and I feel that for them. But we've got to just teach them, especially, a lot of our portfolio is, in not a negative term, but an accidental investor. They're just somebody that's not really the true investor that understands the whole concept. And we have a lot of those, and we have to train them and teach them.
Welcome to Unfiltered, the official podcast of PropertyManager.com. I'm your host, Dylan Scroggins, joined by founder and president of PropertyManager.com, Mr. Matt Speer. We have a special guest today out of the Sunshine State, Mr. John-Michael Elliott from the Elliot and Eijo Real Estate Group. John-Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I know Matt's got a place in Florida. My wife's from Florida, so we'll talk plenty of Florida, but give us a quick intro of just your business and how you got started in property management.
Got started in property management back in the 2004, is when I got my real estate license. 2005, 2006, the short sale boom started happening. The movie Big Short came out, that's a big thing. And I was living through that, and I was making, my living with my young children in that era, and found out that real estate sales were not happening as much. So we decided to, we would go on listing appointments out with individuals, and they were kind of crying on their shoulders, literally crying on their shoulders at times. And we decided, hey, here, what do we need to do for you? You can't sell your house. You can't, you need to move to get another job, what have you. So the property management business was born for us out of that. We took, lemons and made chicken piccata. That's basically how our business was born. We started really small out of a necessity to survive in the business of real estate. And it turned out to be something that has grown immensely for us. And we're super excited that where we're at today.
And you said the word we. Tell us a little bit about the business structure. I know you have a partner, and we'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah. My business partner, Richard, he was in the business with me in real estate. We were, sitting across, I was a mentor to him. His mother was one of my biggest clients, before he moved here. He was a chef at the Ritz-Carlton and the different high-end restaurants, some of them down Miami and Orlando. And then he wanted to get out of that business. So his mother introduced me to him and said, hey, can you teach my son real estate? I was like, oh man, you're one of my best clients. And, they kind of shoot myself in the foot. So he was introduced to me. We hit it off really well. We became good friends. We were working side by side, but not partnership. And then, during that boom time where there were the short sale time, we ran into the situation where, I was getting a sale here and there. He was getting a sale here and there. And we were seeing how both of us were working really hard. We were go-getters. We wanted to do well for ourselves and our family. And we decided to join powers and go on appointments together and work together to just survive. And, that's basically how we got in the business together. And we've flourished since 2004. We've been together as partners. I call him my work wife.
And it's not just about door count, but I'm sure, share a little bit with the current door count and, what are some of your growth goals moving forward?
Yeah, we've got, as of Tuesday, our Tuesday morning meetings, we go over that every Tuesday with our team. We have 351 doors that we personally manage for the Elliot and Eijo group. We do have other agents that work underneath us. It's kind of a different structure, a total of 477 doors that are kind of under our complete management. We do all the back office stuff for everything for those other agents, and we just kind of guide them and have a structure for them to go by. But the Elliot and Eijo group has 351 doors as of Tuesday.
So I mentioned earlier, my wife's from Florida. She actually grew up 45 minutes from Lakeland over in Winter Haven. Shout out Grady Judd, Sheriff of Polk County. So you're in an interesting market, right? So I know, if I'm correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, Polk County, the county you're in, was the fastest growing county in the nation last year, the year before, and maybe it's sustained in the top five. Tell us, what has it been like being in property management in a booming housing market? And then also, what's it been like in a region, maybe like our Arizona or California listeners can relate, where there's like a lot of transient community, people moving and coming, et cetera. Would love just to hear like about that unique market and the challenges, but also the good things of doing PM there.
Yeah, the real estate market here has been, one of those top markets in all the different articles you can read about for quite some time. And Lakeland in particular, it's been one of those places where it's in between Tampa and Orlando, two big metropolitan cities. And, we've been a bedroom community, as I like to call it, for those areas. And we're very affordable in comparison to those areas. So it's allowed for a lot of growth and we've got a lot more land. They're not making any more land on this earth, So we've got a lot of land to expand into. So Lakeland's been a fast growing area. And, there's been a lot of people moving into the area, especially since 2020, the C word. I hate to say it. But during that time period where people were trying to get away from some of the other states and kind of gain some of the freedom back, to be able to roam about, we were able to do that here in Florida. And so it brought a lot of people that were remotely working for companies in other areas. It brought them here to the Central Florida region in particular, or actually in Florida, in the Jacksonville area, Lakeland area, South Florida area. My wife's worked for a major grocer here that's a public supermarket. She's worked for them for 25 years, and she's had a lot of data that she's had her hand on. And they're a huge part of this community. They give a lot back to this community, but they also, her having the insight there, she saw how many people were moving from California, Texas, New York, moving to this area. And during the last few years, since 2020, the real estate boom really took place, and we had such an increase in real estate prices. Rents went up substantially, but now we're starting to see more of a correction to that as well. I mean, we had a major boom that drove up prices to where almost for some people it may have been unaffordable, but now it's starting to see a slight correction. I mean, I've seen it across the nation, a lot. But here in this area, that we've definitely seen a correction in the market, upwards of 10%, and sometimes even a little bit more in certain areas.
So, John-Michael, I want to dig in a bit. Something you said earlier, so that just the transition into how you got started into sort of what's driving some of the growth, just with the boom in that area, and then sort of some of the kind of recalibration with just all the more general market effects. And I'm curious, what's that effect been with your strategy just around growth? Because it sounds like there's been a lot of changes that have it's had to affect how you approach growth for your business. So I'd love to hear just, what that looks like for you, what's got you excited, what's working, maybe what's not working.
Particularly in growth, we've always done it naturally. We, really haven't done a whole lot of advertising. At first, it was the short sales. We were going to listing appointments and we were talking to people and they were saying, "Hey, I can't sell my house." Or I tell them they couldn't sell their house and they were worried about their credit. So we naturally grew that, off of our appointments that we would have. And then, that grew from, one property, back in the day when we first started, then, grew to 10 and 15 and 75. And then, we really, at one point we said, we need to grow a little bit more. Let's look at buying a existing business. And we got lucky to find 100 properties that were for sale. And I feel like we got a pretty good price on it, especially the way it was being managed. I mean, we really improved that portfolio for those owners. And
how long ago was that, the acquisition, the 100?
I would think it's around 10 years ago.
So we really pre-private equity roll-up buzz.
Yeah, and we brought them into speed, and we were able to turn a lot of people's frowns upside down, because I don't think, I love the person that we bought it from, and it turns out to be a great person that I've gotten to know really well since then. But unfortunately, it was just not run very professionally They weren't doing the things that were necessary to really maintain good quality tenants, good quality owners, and keep the properties up. But we definitely turned that around and turned it into a really good portfolio.
So that's a word that we've heard a lot, is the professionalization of the industry. I'm not sure if professionalization is a word itself, but we're going to use it. Talk to us about, like Matt said, as you've grown, how have you professionalized your own business to keep up with that growth and then lay a foundation for the next wave?
Yeah, we've learned a lot of lessons over the years. I mean, starting out in this business, starting out small, we were working off of Excel spreadsheets. We were, going and I was, getting checks delivered to the office or going and picking checks up from some tenants and then going and making out deposit slips and depositing them into banks for the owners and each different branch of each bank. So we were doing it very, very archaic. And then now, that we have all these amazing tools at our disposal, we've been able to implement a lot of those things that help us to do a good job. I mean, one of the biggest things that we've done is, just our routine inspections of the properties and making sure that the tenants are keeping up with the properties, that there's no deferred maintenance that just isn't we don't want anything overlooked. We want to make sure we have an eye on that property for the owner because we're their eyes and ears. They're trusting in us. And we learned a big lesson in that, with that, you've got to, cover your butt. You've got to have that documentation. You've got to have everything in writing, have a bunch of pictures. I mean, from the days looking back at where we started from to where we are now, I mean, I would look back at that person. If that person still existed today, I would say, man, you were a huge liability to yourself. And, because we weren't doing a lot of things, we were doing a lot of things right, but the documentation and the proof is one of the things that, has helped us to really stand apart, because I think a lot of owners, trust that you're doing those things and trust that all the property managers are doing those things. And a lot of times they don't check up when everything seems to be going good. But when, things start to happen and things are going downhill, you get a tenant that's, needs to be evicted or is paying late. And then, they're wanting to look into things and see how their property is. And they start digging into it. And if you don't have those things, they're asking for those things, even though you did some of those things, you did regular inspections, but you didn't go through and document all that and take a bunch of pictures. I have a particular story that stands out in my mind that really opened our eyes to that. Was we picked up a property from an investor. He was a nomad, a traveler, and he had several, rental properties that he had that we took over from another property manager. And when we took over that management portfolio, he, didn't have the greatest of properties, and those properties, those tenants weren't, managed very well. I mean, you go in and you do your first inspection and they said, man, I've been living here 10 years and you're the first person that's ever wanted to come in and look at my house and they felt like it was intrusive to them. But at the end of the day, we had to explain that we have a job to do and we want to make sure that we're doing, a thorough job for the owner. And that means us looking at the house, and we don't want to be intrusive. We want to, try and limit the time that we're there and causing you, any frustration, but we've got a job to do. And so that particular scenario, we were doing those inspections and we were walking through, but we weren't documenting them. We were writing down that we went there on this certain date, but we didn't take any pictures. We would call them up. I remember sitting in the driveway of the house, talking to them, saying, hey, this person isn't taking very good care of your house. You put him in there a few years ago. We've taken this person over. And he's like, well, I really don't have money to, to fix this place up. Can we just try and, maintain them and do these things? And, it just got to a point where, it just was getting too bad. And then she was like, can't pay, and then had to evict or, had to get her to vacate. And then it was, why? And then he comes down and goes to fix the house up and says, well, why is my house this bad? And I said, well, we've been telling you this for a while. And you said, I don't have the money to fix it up. We need to just maintain what we can. And I was like, okay. But, and so at the end of the day, this person, basically tried to extort us and say that we weren't doing what was right, and that we weren't doing our inspections, and asked for proof that we did our inspections. And I said, hey man, we talked on the phone several times and I told you these things, and I had a pretty good relationship with this person. And it just turned out that, we parted ways with that person. We didn't fall to the, to the extortion, but there was a couple of things that we made concessions on, I think, and, helped to make everything go away. And hearing somebody tell you a tens of thousand, figure that they wanted to settle with you and extort you, it was quite eye-opening. So that was like a turning point in our business.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, that story that you're sharing, and I think there's a lot of people going to be listening to this that they will have something similar that's happened in their business. And I think the fundamental driver of that is, there's just a lot of bad actors out there. And so if you just kind of peeled back the onion, like why did that situation happen? Well, it sort of all started with that first property manager that set the expectations, that placed the tenant, that didn't send people out to check on the property, that didn't communicate really what was going on with that owner. That owner never steps into the property, and it's all this builds up. And, you end up kind of holding the bag, and it sounds like you navigated it well. But yeah, I just think as an industry, it's like thinking about professionalization or, another hot topic, which is similar. It's like asset management versus, we're property managers, right? It all kind of bakes down to just like having a higher standard for our profession. And, you wouldn't have that same conversation with your money manager, right? You wouldn't extort your money manager. You wouldn't extort your lawyer. Like we should be, we should set the bar that high. And I think it all starts with the right tools and systems and having that confidence in ourselves and how we operate, which it sounds like, through your progression at running your business, that's really where your mind's at now.
Yeah, you brought up the term asset management, and I love that about talking about our business, because that's what we do. And we've our big focus this last few years is to more focus on the asset management part of it, explaining to owners, the income, sometimes the income that you're getting in your hand, the assets that you're receiving on a monthly basis, may not, with the mortgage rates that have been high, the low down payments that people have to put down to get into a rental property. There's a lot of people that are not as educated in the industry, and they're thinking, quick money. Hey, people are own real estate. It's going to be, I want to make a rental income and live off of that on a monthly basis. And it's not just that. I mean, because you could sometimes get $100 a month and make $1,200 a year, but you can also, the things that are less seen, such as, the equity growth, the people paying down your mortgage, putting money in that piggy bank for you. Those are things that are the things that are less seen in this industry, but it's something that we've been driving our employees and ourselves to explain to owners, because we deal with a lot of what we call accidental investors, right? We've got people that are, not really the true money people. They're just wanting to build a little retirement for themselves, or, have that, try and create some generational wealth in real estate, which is a great thing to do, but we just have to educate people, and we've got tools that we've implemented to do that. That's hopefully going to definitely help to bring their mindset around, because that's a huge part of property management.
I think that, when I started my property management business in Indianapolis, it really was a result of, having 30 or so investment properties. And so I started it personally from the investment property mindset. And so, the basic cash flow analysis, the 7 different expenses, and thinking about mortgage pay down and tax advantages, and the whole, I sort of had that fundamental knowledge either doing for myself. I was always blown away with, because at first I was like, all right, we're going to hire another property manager. Like back when I first started, I'm like, I'm not a property manager. I ended up deciding to start the property management company because of the conversations I had with those property managers, not understanding cash flow. And so I wonder how many property managers, not just at the owner level of the business, but your actual, who's talking to your property owners frequently, can they pull out a piece of paper and run a cash flow analysis and talk about these things? And if the answer to that is no, that should be priority number 1 next week in your team meeting, is implement some of those things, because, the accidental landlord, the accidental investor, they don't know what they don't know. So they don't know that they're not getting that. But I think it needs to be a fundamental upgrade just in the industry as a whole to have that mindset.
Just come up with a performer report that shows them all those aspects of things that they less see.
Yeah, because how many accidental landlords that were like a lot of people talk about that as like a negative, where because they're looking for more of the investor profile because there's more doors or there's more sophistication. But how many of those accidental landlords would through that asset management approach would you actually turn into repeat, like where they'd be like have the aha and go, whoa, like wait, what's bonus depreciation, what's cost segregation, what, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, I want to buy another one, you know. So I think it's just a mindset shift.
I told you guys before we hit record that we just had our third kid. And at the hospital, you check the box saying, hey, you haven't traveled out of the country in the last 3 months. Maybe in the owner vetting, check a box of you've not listened to a social media TikTok influencer talk about cash flow real estate in the last 3 months. There needs to be some sort of vetting because, if they're getting their information from TikTok and they see that $100, they're not going to be happy, even though that's where their expectations should have been.
Yeah, exactly. And the value of the property that is growing over time, it's insane. I mean, really, if you look at, especially in this area, I mean, people could stand to make tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars over a short period of time, but it's not something that they're going to hold in their hands. It's something that's there. They can cash in when they want to, but right now it's not in their hands. And some people are saying, well, I'm only making, $250. We're only making $300 a month. Well, yeah, but you're making that on top of the piggy bank that everybody's putting money in for you, and so that's just less seen. I mean, I remember back in 2005 when I had one of my rental properties and I was sitting there going, man, I'm not making any money on it. It was kind of eating my lunch for me. And I saw people offloading them at a discounted rate because, they were short selling them and messing their credits up, for an extended period of time. And I stopped there and I said to myself, I'm just going to fight through this. I know that this property is going to come back. It's like the stock market, the stocks go up, they go down. You don't sell them when they're low, you sell them when they're high. And so you just have to ride that wave. And that's what I did with my personal portfolio. And now I've got, a few paid off houses that at one time were eating my lunch for me, but now they're paid off because I had somebody putting that money in a piggy bank for me. And I had, the things that were less seen, the less sexy things, I was able to get past all that and, now have a few properties that's now making me a good amount of money every single month. And that's where a lot of these accidental investors, some of them are just starting out where I was, and I see that, and I feel that for them. But we've got to just teach them, especially, a lot of our portfolio is in not a negative term, but an accidental investor. They're just somebody that's not really the true investor that understands the whole concept. And we have a lot of those, and we have to train them and teach them.
Yeah, I was going to shift gears a little bit. I can't believe I made it 25 plus minutes here without mentioning the word AI. So I'm just going to have to break the streak. So, I mean, I'm going to specifically ask a question on like AI search. Because I always like, before these conversations, I always like pulling the company up, putting it into ChatGPT and the main market that they're in and just see what shows up, right? And I say, who is the best property manager in Lakeland, Florida? And number one, Elliot and Eijo. Right, showing up on ChatGPT. So I'd love to hear like your thoughts on, ChatGPT, AI search. Like, do you feel this in your business? Like, are people reaching out and finding you on ChatGPT? Are you asking that question of like, hey, where do you find us? Because I've noticed personally that like ChatGPT in just the last month, instead of recommending like 10 options or 5 options when you ask that question, it's usually just one, and you actually have to tell it to give you more. And so if you're showing up number one, I mean, I would imagine that's having an effect on your business, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, it does. It has a big effect on our business. I mean, that's one of the things like back before AI, we'd have Google and Google reviews and things like that. And, we, really focused on making sure that, getting our clients to give true representations of what we did for them, tenants and owners alike, because it was very important to us. So building that reputation is what's helped build our growth. I mean, we naturally have grown. Our phones are ringing more now than they ever have. I mean, we get several calls a day for people wanting us to take them on as clients. And we've been able to be a little bit more picky nowadays. I mean, at first, when we got in the business, we were taking pretty much anything that we could get our hands on to survive. But now it's like, hey, we want to deal with people that have decent properties, that, we're not taking on somebody's headache. But going back to the AI portion of it, I mean, it is definitely definitely helped. I mean, it helps us. I mean, we use it on a daily basis, whether it's to, find a certain, I mean, I use it in my personal life. I use it in my business life. I'll look for, hey, what do I want to eat tonight? Give me some good ideas. And it'll just throw out some recipes for me. Or, what's the best property management company in town? And, that is, something we do every single day. Is I've even taught my team to use AI for their responses to owners to make sure that they're not coming off, very crass or rude, or, that they're giving people a response in a respectful way, but also, it to deliver the message that you want to get across.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And it sounds like too, your story from really start to finish, around the Big Short financial crash type, what really kicked it off, where it's like, hey, we need a solution here. And, you got the potential clients, they're kind of crying on the shoulder looking for the solution. And I feel like from the beginning for you, it's been reputation driven. It's like you're coming from a position of how can I help you? How can I provide value? And it sounds like your business has really been built on that reputation. And, in this ChatGPT world, I think reputation is sort of what it's looking for, those signals. And so, I mean, it definitely doesn't hurt to have a 4.8 Google rating, quite a few reviews. And I think on our platform, you're 25th or 27th in the nation, number 1 in Lakeland. And so, yeah, it's like foundationally, if your reputation's strong and, you take that asset management approach, people call you. And it sounds like they are.
Yeah, we take it very seriously. I mean, we focus on giving results to owners and even tenants. I mean, we for a tenant, we want to make sure that they're comfortable in a home, that they're, we're dealing with all the maintenance issues that come up when we're that liaison between the owner and the tenant. And we sometimes have to be we're somebody's hero and we're somebody's villain in every story. We have to work between that and make sure that we're doing what's right in accordance with the law and keeping up our reputation. Our reputation is paramount to us. So if we have an owner that doesn't want to do something that is above board, we're not gonna even think about doing that. We're just tell them that that's not the way that we do business. That's not the way we do things. We educate them on the way that things should be done in accordance with the law. Whether it's, HUD guidelines or whatever the rules are. And we're focused on that. And I think that, if you look at our reviews, you can see that, there's a lot of owner reviews in there, but there's a ton of tenant reviews. And you don't see a lot of tenant reviews on property management companies that are 5-star. You see a lot of 1-stars, because people aren't doing a good job and they want to come in and complain that they didn't get their deposit back or they didn't do this or do that. But we're, the things that we've put into place for our business, and being as thorough as we are in our business, it's definitely helped to keep our reputation up and not get those bad reviews, because we have the defense in front of us. We have all the documentation for an owner or a tenant.
Yeah, and the Mark Ainley from Chicago GC Realty, he turned me on to the book Pitch Anything. We talked about it on a previous podcast. He told me that he listened to my sales pitch and told me I needed to improve. He signed up for what we had, but he was like, you need to read this book. It'll help you. I read it and I'm obsessed with it. But I've been using, it's basically this idea of controlling the frame. And so I think most property managers, when they talk to a prospective client, the prospective client immediately goes into, here's my 50 questions. I got off of Bigger Pockets. I need to ask you these 50 questions. Now they control the frame. They're interviewing you. But when you come from an asset management, a reputation driven approach, a BDM, an owner that's doing sales for a property management company, they need to control the frame and say, no, actually, hey, we're top in our market. We're selective. I've got a couple questions for you because we don't take on every property. And that's, to me, a complete game changer. And it took me a book to read that, to get that conclusion. It sounds like you just naturally execute on that. But yeah, I think it's a big deal too.
Several open areas where we've, just had phone calls with people about their properties, and we've had those conversations, and then all of a sudden we're like, I just don't think we're going to be a good fit because of you've already given me all these red flags, the things that you don't want to do and that you're not going to do, and it's just a rental, and you don't have the same mindset as us. We don't want to damage our reputation by allowing you to control that whole aspect of the business. And we don't, one of the things we get owners that say, oh, I want to have control over this, and this. And we say, this is the way our business is structured. And, if you want a property manager like that, and maybe we're not the ones for you, because we've got not a reputation to uphold for you. We want to keep you out of the courts. We want to keep ourselves out of the courts, and we want to provide a good service for everybody involved. and we're the professionals and we have to sell ourselves as that. So that's definitely something that's come naturally for us, because if we see a bad review come across at any time, I mean, it's all hands on deck, finding out what happened, why it happened, how we can fix it, listen, sympathize, empathize, and react is one of the things that my business partner and I, preach to our team, and apologize in there. There's apologizing there too. But, doing all those things and making sure that we're getting every, because I dig into every single story. If you look at any of the reviews that we have from our company, that's a negative review. It's a story, and I usually draw it out and I turn it into almost an advertisement for prospective clients that want to come on with us. They see, oh, a tenant didn't get their deposit back. And well, here's the reason, Mr. Tenant, that you didn't get it back. You did all these things wrong, and we had all these things in writing. And hey, this is why you need to hire a property manager, because you'll run into scenarios like this, and not know what to do.
That's genius. That's genius. That's really good. Wow. Yeah, that's really good.
That's a 40 chest right there coming out of Florida. John-Michael, we've talked a lot about some big industry trends, right? The professionalization of the industry, AI, accidental landlords. What are some other things at a national scale that get you excited and concerned about property management right now?
And you mentioned it. I mean, I think the most exciting thing that I can talk about right now is AI. AI it's a growing thing. It's its own being, but it is such a great tool for, especially, not only us, but the consumer themselves. I mean, they're able to come up with the good questions, and be able to sometimes get educated, through that in finding stuff very quickly, and being able to just understand how our business works a little bit better, I think. But that's one of the most exciting things that I can see, is just implementing AI into our business on a daily basis. We've implemented AI with our maintenance coordination, and have an AI live assistant that takes phone calls for us, helps to triage things. That's been a great tool for us. But yeah,
I mean, are you working with a vendor for that, or is that something you guys are doing with like ChatGPT?
Yeah, we're definitely working with a company to do that. We're working with a big company. I'm sure a lot of people know them through the industry. They were huge at the NARPM broker owners this last year. They had little kangaroos jumping around.
Yeah. Rue might be in the name. Yeah, we know paid spots. Exactly. But yeah, it sounds like vendor Rue's been helpful for you.
Yeah. They have been very helpful, and they were just like us. They're in the property management business and found something that they needed to help improve. And it's definitely, from the time we've taken that on to where we are now, with making some changes in our business. I mean, we've been able to, triage and get rid of like 30% of the calls that come in, just from being able to have somebody triage them very well and hit the reset button or the GFCI, or, and ask the questions, have them send pictures and videos automatically. And it's been able for our team to just work on those things and be able to figure things out much quicker than, we were able to in the past.
Is there anything that concerns you about the industry right now?
There's so many. It's always changing, all the legislation, all the, the government intervention and things. I think, here in Florida, I think we've been very blessed with having very landlord friendly and industry friendly laws and that are helping us. I am huge on, tenants' rights and them having their rights, and I fight for them when I need to, but also just, being able to, as a landlord, have your own rights, and being able to navigate around that. I mean, that's just one of the things that concerns me. I don't necessarily like what they're doing or trying to do in New York, or some of the things that you hear about in Colorado and California. Those types of things scare me here, because it's just so much more work and so much more litigiousness in those areas that I see.
Well, I mean, I think you saw the C word, COVID. I mean, a lot of people, some of those things happened, and not, we won't get into the politics of it, but some of those things happen and people respond and move down to Florida, and that's part of the boom. Yeah, that's all. I think that's top of mind for a lot of people. But yeah, I think Florida is just for the leader in terms of landlord rights and some of those things. So hopefully that keeps rolling for you.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a good trend so far. So
Well, John-Michael, this has been awesome. We're going to transition to the lightning round, but this is actually a new question before we get to the lightning round that we asked Spencer Sutton with Evernest. We've kept it in the agenda, but running a property management company is a grind. Like any small business, it's a grind, but there seems to be a unique grind tied to our audience, especially property management. In that grind, how has property management and running a company changed you as a person these last 10 to 15 years?
It's going to sound kind of bad, but it's kind of hardened me a little bit. It's made me to where like I was always the yes person. I always wanted to give and be kind. I mean, not that I don't want to be kind to anybody, but I was giving. I was always the yes person. Now I have to be more analytical about things. I have to look at things from multiple perspectives. I have to analyze it and determine what the best thing is, in our business in accordance with whatever laws and rules are that govern us. So, but it's definitely made me, it's strengthened me. Let's say hardened. It's strengthened me. Let's say that.
I like that. Great answer. I think we can all relate to that in some form or fashion when we're running a business. We talked a lot about different tools and apps. And once again, there's no paid sponsorships here on PropertyManager.com. But would love to hear from you. What has been your favorite tool or app for your business the last 12 to 18 months?
We just talked about Vendoroo. I think they've been a great asset to add to our stack of applications, having then integrated into our property management software and all the other softwares that we use. We all integrate into one, our rent bind system that we use. That's been a great help, is being able to have like that open API with them. It's been able to help us to really, I was growing up, I was in technology. I was in software before I was in real estate, and worked for a software company that sold to real estate companies. And that's how I got in the business. But being able to have all that stuff integrated and making our lives easier through technology has been, has been great for Vendoroo in the last 12 months. Yeah. To answer that question, that lightning fast answer that I gave you.
Love it. How about a book or podcast that every property management owner or leader should check out?
Oh yeah, I love PM Build by Mark Cunningham. That's a good one. He is entertaining. He's got a lot of good information. I find myself forwarding a lot of stuff to some of my clients, even, and to my staff, saying, "Hey, check this out. This is what I've been preaching to you guys." And if I have me and my business partner are having a discussion that we might not agree on something, and that something pops up, like, "Hey, look, here's what Mark Cunningham has to say about this." So I really like.
Hey, Mark just got his onboarding form filled out. I think we're looking at will be a verified property manager here soon.
All right. One word to describe the future of PM.
Promising. I would say promising. There's a lot of promise in this business for everybody. Empowered is another good one. There's a lot of good tools and automation that's here that's giving us the power to really do a good job.
I like it. Well, this has been awesome. We really appreciate the time. I know you're still like 75 and sunny in Florida, and you mentioning about the market, your business, your systems. There might be some jealousy brewing. Some of the people who are listening to this, but you've built something special. We really appreciate the time, and thanks again for your insight, just the industry as a whole as well. And Matt, any last thoughts or questions before we sign off?
I'm just wondering we might have to cut this, but I know you've been talking about potentially visiting down there in Florida and John-Michael's neck of the woods. So you guys have to hook up on that. Maybe you'll have a rental he can put you in or something for, an extended stay. We'll see.
Yeah. I'm sweating in Florida Christmas, so maybe we can go play some golf.
Yeah, exactly. It's beautiful that time of year out here.
I love it. Well, John-Michael, thanks so much. And we really appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys having us.